So many mysteries and secrets still shroud the truth about Mars, our own moon, and even a secret space program that's been developed in the shadows of society. Tonight, I'm joined by Billy Carson, where we're going to dive deep into the truth about Mars and what NASA's holding back from society. Billy, you've appeared on some big shows, such as Coast to Coast AM, Gaia TV with the Secret Space Program, and even the Anunnaki series with me and Gerald Clark. I just want to tell you, it's a great honor to have you here tonight. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, fantastic, man. I appreciate the opportunity just to be here and that you actually, considered me for this mini documentary. It's great.
Well, I mean, there's no one I could better think of for discussing the Secret Space Program and Mars and all the things we're going to go through. So what's new with you, Billy? Are you doing any new projects?
Oh, a lot of new projects, man, all the time. So far, we have just released season 2 of Deep Space. Season 1 was a big hit last year with Gaia TV, and now we have season 2 out, and the first 4 episodes have already aired. I think it's phenomenal. It's really eye-opening. Even when I watch it, I feel like I'm learning some from watching. And I was heavily involved in the research for the project. But even when I watch it, I'm like, oh wow, I learned some more stuff. So it's pretty good. And it's an all-star cast as well, which is phenomenal. And then also I'm in Ancient Civilizations on Gaia, which is a totally new original series that this is the first season number 1. And Melissa Tittle is the producer. She was also the producer over at Ancient Aliens. And she was also the producer on Deep Space season 1 as well. She's done a phenomenal job on Ancient Civilizations. And I'm really excited about this series because it really delves deep into the nature of reality, which is one of my favorite topics. So it's really interesting. And even again, when I watch it, I actually feel like I'm learning from watching it. A lot of stuff going on.
Wow, I mean, I guess to say you're busy is kind of an understatement, huh?
Yeah, I'm working on my book. I'm trying to get my book completed before I get to the Conscious Life Expo in February, so I can have the book signing. And I just literally before we got on, the reason why I was a little bit late getting on this call was because Donnie Arcade, our top artist, just released his album. Actually, just officially showed up in the system, which is called "Go See the World," the prequel to Enki.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a really nice album. It's going to be phenomenal. I think it's going to teach people a lot, and it's also kind of fun at the same time. We go into the chakra systems. We go into a lot of great stuff, man. Ancient civilizations. It's just a great thing.
Well, Billy, it's an honor to have you here tonight. Now we're gonna leave sort of the 3D of Earth. We're gonna go into our neighboring, call it our cosmic neighborhood, right? Around Mars, our own moon, and what's the truth about what's going on around us. So we're going to try to go in somewhat of a chronological order, start with some really interesting information, and then go into some deep topics after that. Now, many might not realize some of the amazing wonders that Mars has. Before we get into some of the deeper truths and some of these ancient secrets that we're going to discuss tonight, it'd be good to set the stage, kind of set the stage of our conscious understanding of what Mars is like. How big is it? What kind of environments does it have? One of the things that people may not realize is that how extreme some of the natural features on the planet are for a planet as small as Mars. Mars is quite a bit smaller than Earth, actually, and the diameter itself is less than 50% the size of Earth. But some of the features on the planet make Earth's features just look like dwarfs. And I want to go over a couple of those things because it's pretty amazing to learn how unique Mars's climate and history was. And you can still see the remnants of that with ice caps on both the north and the south poles. Whatever's left of, long ago past that used to have life and water flowing and all these things. Looking at Mars, we know Mars is called the red planet, but why is it called the red planet? And that's something I think that gets a little bit lost with people, is that the reason why it's red actually is a clue to what occurred in the past. It's kind of amazing to learn about if you start just doing kind of, some of the geeky stats, right? You learn about, well, what's the highest mountain in the solar system, right? Our entire solar system. And you actually find out it's on Mars. And it's a mountain called Olympus Mons. And it's 72,000 feet tall. So when you look at something like some of our highest mountains we have in the 20,000 foot range. This would make those look like anthills. And not only that, but this is actually a massive shield volcano that extends in such a large diameter in area that it actually can cover almost the entire country of France. This is a massive, massive mountain. Where is Mars? What has happened to its climate in the past and its environments to lead to this kind of barren wasteland that we see today? Mm-hmm. And people may not realize that Mars actually has 2 moons called Phobos and Deimos. And this heavy layer of iron oxide that's covered the planet we're going to actually look into why that is the way it is and the color that it is, and see if that has some clues to what caused its own destruction in the past.
I mean, you hit it right on the head. There's a lot about Mars that people just don't know or understand. Based on how they've grown up and what they've been told through textbooks and TV, they believe it's just a small ball of rock ice. But it's totally something absolutely different. It's a living planet. It's still alive. Mars has an atmosphere. Mars has a lot of atmospheric gases, barometric pressure, and a lot of people wouldn't even think that Mars could possibly be 99 degrees at the equator in the summer. That's the highest temperature ever recorded by the Opportunity rover at the equator in the summer. So when you put that all together, you go, wait a minute, 99 degrees? As a matter of fact, a few articles came out several years ago that showed that in the winter here on Earth, it was colder in Detroit than it was on Mars. Okay, so that gives you an idea. It's a planet where it definitely can sustain life right now in terms of temperature, at least. Also, we have Valles Marineris, which is the largest trench in our solar system that we know of at this moment. This trench is so massive. It's like Mars Grand Canyon for what we have here on Earth. But the only thing is, this trench, in my opinion, was carved out by a massive cataclysm. And the massive cataclysm that I'm talking about is potentially what we see now are the remnants of an exploded planet, which we call the asteroid belt. In some ancient texts, it's called a hammered bracelet in the Sumerian tablets. And it's mentioned even in the Bible. So everybody knew of this exploded planet in ancient times. It's even mentioned in the Enuma Elish. And basically in the Enuma Elish, what happens is a planet called Tiamat, which from different perspectives is a collision between a satellite of a brown dwarf star that crashes into Tiamat and makes it explode. And from another perspective, it seems like an actual ancient war that probably happened and this planet exploded. But what happened was Mars, according to Tom Van Flandern, which was an astrophysicist who actually worked with NASA and at NASA, he said that he thinks that that Mars was a moon of this Tiamat planet, this planet which was 4 times the size of Earth. And he based it on the trajectory that Mars' current orbit is in right now. It's the elliptical orbit, and based on the mathematics, it seemed that it would have to have been thrown into that orbit after the planetary body that is now the asteroid belt exploded. So with the side that faced Mars, the side of Mars that was facing that exploded planet is what's the most charred and the most gorged. On the other side of Mars that was obviously not facing that, scientists consider it the smoothest surface of any planet in our solar system. So you can see there's evidence there that one side took a major hit, which then pulled the crust of Mars and shifted it probably about 45 degrees on its axis, and probably causing all kind of volcanic activity as well.
And we're talking about something like a gash in the entire planet that was taken out, right? I mean, to give people some perspective, I don't know if I'm sure plenty of people listening to this have been to the Grand Canyon. It's one of the largest canyons on Earth, and yet if we were to try to give some perspective on this canyon that's on Mars, this canyon is 6 times deeper than the Grand Canyon, and it's over 1,000 miles longer. So this is clearly something that, is this water erosion, or is this a gash left over from some cataclysm in the past?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think more or less it's probably the second of the two. It seems like from that exploded planet, which is now the asteroid belt, I believe that's evidence of that explosion when Mars was obviously orbiting that potential planet.
So Billy, have you, in any of your research, have you delved into what some of the Anunnaki prehistory is on Mars, and what was it used for, a mining and smelting location for Earth? Have you seen anything with that?
Well, doing a lot of research on the Anunnaki and the Ijiji working class, going into the Encyclopedia Britannica, even some Wikipedia references and some other references to the Anunnaki, even in books like Gerald Clark's book, and even some of Sitchin's work. It all seems to have the same perspective, that there was a way station on Mars with a civilization of working class Anunnaki called the Ijiji that literally worked on Mars, built a civilization there, and mined it for resources day in and day out, night and day. It was back-breaking labor, as a matter of fact. I mean, they really got to the point where they got so frustrated with the labor. Not only was it back-breaking labor, but they didn't even have any women. And that got them really frustrated. And I think this might be part of the reference in the Bible in Genesis 6, where these Ijiji leave Mars and come to Earth and then circle Enki's and Lil's camp and say that basically they're going to go to war with them if they don't get any relief. But at the same time, they also took back with them some women from Earth. So it's an amazing story, and there's a couple different perspectives of it, but it really does appear that these Ijiji were working, mining on Mars, for all different types of metals, not just gold, but many other types of metals. And they would also get shipments in from Earth for gold, and they would take that from Mars as a launching point to rendezvous back with their orbiting planet.
That's right, and so people want to know, to look into some of these ancient tablets, look into some of the ancient Sumerian and Babylonian cuneiform tablets, where they talk about some of this ancient prehistory of mining on both Earth and talking about beyond Earth, and how Mars was possibly a way station in between Nibiru, between when they would go between gathering metals and resources, and this is the point where they would meet up, and Mars is a perfect location for that, being so close to Earth. And so we're gonna move out of kind of ancient history, and we're gonna go into some newer evidence to look at, because right now we have a paradigm that exists. The book that I wrote, called The Illusion of Us, is based on the idea that there's this great illusion of our reality that exists, and that illusion is based on the fact that we're given a certain narrative of what's real and what's not. And one of those things that's very striking is that we're told we're the only life that we know of, Earth itself, and there's no life we know in the rest of the entire universe, right? It's all just empty, dead space. And that narrative has been followed very, very closely because of the power of religion and the power of the model of reality that's been controlled for so long here. And it's interesting, we see so many of these rover images and all these kind of teasing news articles that come out where they say, oh, we found microbial life. Oh, never mind, we didn't. They go back and forth for years now. And if anybody wonders why that is, it's simply because the second that life was announced on another planet, it would cause a paradigm shift. So to understand why they're controlling that is because of how powerful religion is, with the idea that we're just kind of alone here and there's nothing else there. Because if someone was to say, well, there's life on Mars, well, then it would lead to much bigger questions, right? Like, is there life anywhere else? And is there intelligent life anywhere else? And so you go down this rabbit hole, and that's what they're trying to avoid. Now here, in 2014, we had the Mars rover that was, walking around on the surface of Mars. Some don't believe that was real, and some do. But let's go with the possibility that they're actually on Mars, and they say they were, and they captured this image right here. In this image, if you look closely in the circled area, you can see what is clear, even if for someone that doesn't study geology or anything, that there's some kind of a spiral shell there. And if you do a little bit of research into what this spiral shell is, you find out that it actually exists on Earth as well. And it's called an ammonite fossil shell. And it's a very common fossil shell on Earth, but then you start to scratch your head and be like, well, the same exact fossil is on Mars. So then you got to start asking some big questions. And that's where we're going to get into looking into, well, what is the truth? What actually happened to Mars? Did it have life? Did it have intelligent life? And what actually occurred in those times? And to start, we're going to go back to the 1970s during the Viking probe missions. And this is where I think the great mysteries of Mars begin. And those mysteries begin in a place called Cydonia, right, Billy?
Yeah, absolutely. Right in Cydonia, man, which is an amazing, amazing ancient city is what it really is. You can see evidence of the DNM pyramid, which is a 5-sided pyramid that has phenomenal geometry. It's clear. It's not even a question whether it's not is or isn't a pyramid. It's a pyramid, and there's no type of weathering that we know of at this moment that can cause that type of geometry to just happen to a mountain. Okay. You can see a moat around where there used to be water. Evidence of water is very clear all over Mars. It's not even a question. And nearby, you can even see a small city. But what's so interesting about the small remnant of the city that's nearby is that it actually is in the same exact formation of the Pleiadian star cluster. And that's an amazing, to me, mind-blowing, thing. The fact that this city is set up to match the Pleiadian star cluster. And then if you look at a city ordnance map of Avebury in the UK on Earth, you pull down this ordnance map from the internet, directly from the Avebury site, and you overlay it on top of the Cydonia region of Mars, you find that the man-made anomalies on the ordnance map in Avebury, UK, perfectly match the anomalies that are on Mars in Cydonia. And this is an amazing revelation. This was on this clip came from Sightings, which is a show that came out in the 90s. They were so amazed about the images at first as well, because NASA was openly showing this space on Mars. Some shows like Sightings and some of the others started raising too many questions, and when this came out and showed that they match, and it appears that there's obviously a direct connection between Earth and Mars on a consistent basis for this to happen. Even the guy speculated that was in the show that it may have been where they were genetically modifying humans.
That's right.
That's an amazing revelation, because according to these ancient tablets, that's exactly what the Anunnaki were down here doing, genetically modifying humanoids on this planet in order to make us slaves of them. So it's just really an amazing, amazing thing that, this correlation that's there.
That's right. And so people want to know, this is a real image. This is not doctored except for the circles I made. And this is from the 1976 Viking 1 orbiter mission, which was the first photographs ever taken of the Mars surface. And that's why this is so important for people to understand, because it represents the first time we got to see the surface of Mars before there was any doctoring or discussions behind whether or not they wanted to hide anything. We actually got to see the truth. And that's why it's so important to understand why the 1976 images need to be the ones that are looked at the most. And let's go over why that's important. The 1976 image of the famous face on Mars is undoubtedly the reason why it launched it into kind of this big truth movement. And some people call conspiracies, right? And so the face on Mars comes out, and everyone is looking at the fact that it's got these striking shadows and very defined facial features with what looks like a helmet of some kind of maybe a past king, which we'll go over later. But it's very interesting to look to me how clear the 1976 photos of that face are. Okay, and look at the shadows and how defined it is. And then you look at what happened in 1998 and then again in 2001. After all of this time, with people really building up to the idea that there truly was a face on Mars, you had NASA say, well, we're going to go back and take more photographs of it. And in between those years, you saw between 1998 and 2001, these images that were then taken that show nothing like the 1976 image. Now, there's been a lot of theories behind this. Now, and the unfortunate thing behind, I would say, the majority of society that don't ask as many questions as they need to, is when they saw these images, most people accepted them and then just moved on. It was like they turned a page and that was over for them. Whereas reality, if you if you analyze the 1976 Viking 1 orbiter images, you can see what you have there is nothing like what was captured in the later two shots. And so what happened, right? Well, some of the theories are either the images were doctored, or an even more possible scenario that is quite shocking to actually consider would be that this face was destroyed by some kind of a weapon mass. Billy, what is your opinion on this face on Mars, and do you think that the 1976 images are without a doubt clear on what's showing on that planet?
Oh, the 1976 images are so clear. They're some of the most high definition images we've ever received from Mars since all these expeditions began. Even the more current, more modern, up-to-date rovers that are capable of all this HD and all this video and everything else, we get these low-resolution images to download from the NASA.gov site. The 1976, we actually have a high resolution. I think that goes up to like 3 or 4 megabyte image, which clearly shows exactly what we said. Pyramids, a clear face, a clear eye, clear nose, clear mouth, and then some type of a city off to the right. And I really do believe that the reason why you see the later images more degraded is because they purposefully either degraded them, or the second option is that they definitely destroyed them. And I'm starting to lean more towards looking at the most recent image that it was destroyed, that they sent a rover in there and rolled it up in there with maybe some type of a device and imploded it so that they can destroy the features of the face, which appears, to me, it appears that's what they've done. It would be very easy to do that because they even had a rover that went there that had 5 rovers that came off, a little mini rover. So sending one rover out on a death mission wouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, if you look at this, the image on the right, the more red image, look how defined the eye shadow is.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fake that. This is not a trick of light. And look how large the shadow extends off of the face. That proves that it's a 3D structure that has height and has defined features. Whereas the original image, you all of a sudden look at the difference, Billy. Look at the shadow. That, to me, that shadow disappearing. Yes, someone could argue that the camera was taken at a different place. There wasn't a shadow because it was directly overhead. But to me, the 1998 photo was taken on an angle. Looks to me almost the exact same angle as the 1976 photo, and yet there's no shadow now. What does that say? That the height, the defined features that gave it a shadow were destroyed.
Exactly. They collapsed. They've been collapsed. Now, whether it's a natural collapse or an artificial collapse, we don't know. But, all I can say is 9/11 and Building 7.
Yeah, I think we can probably agree that it's just fallen on itself for no reason, right?
Right. And if people want to say, well, that's too crazy to send a bomb to Mars, well, don't forget, we actually sent the bomb to the moon, guys.
That's right.
And so, I mean, this is something that we do, unfortunately, as a species. We like to blow things up. So I wouldn't put it past them.
Okay, so let's get into some of these a little bit deeper now. Let's progress to the next step. And the next step is where I consider some smoking gun truth here. And I put this is part of what I have in the book, because to me, if anyone wants to look at the evidence on Mars that is there from an expert that can prove that something occurred, they strongly need to look into a man named Dr. Brandenburg. Now, to start, let's give a little information behind this, because one of the most interesting things I found was that if you were to try to go find images of Dr. Brandenburg, I found it very kind of not comical, but sad that almost every image was an image of him kind of not ready for the camera, or they're blurry or something, almost immediately like to discredit this person. So the image I have here was the best one I could find, because this man, in my opinion, has been so massively the intent of making him seem like he's not legitimate and not an expert. It has occurred on such a fundamental level since 2012 that I need to bring some credibility to this man, because he deserves so much credibility. And so let's get a little information behind this brilliant man named Dr. Brandenburg. If people don't know, in 2012, Dr. Brandenburg was he was studying basically the planet of Mars. And the reason he was studying it was because he actually worked for NASA. He worked for jet propulsion labs, all these things, because he's basically a genius. He had a PhD, right? So he's a plasma physicist, and he's designing this advanced rocket propulsion for Moon and Mars. And he's studying the soil, and he's basically an expert on kind of nuclear and advanced weapon dynamics as well. So he's got all these different things under his belt, and he's not anyone who's a conspiracy theorist. He's never been interested in those things. If you read about his career, he was someone who was very highly sought after by NASA. So he's studying the soil on Mars because they want to land and take off from the surface, and so they have to understand the composition of both the atmosphere and the ground, so you could fully kind of calibrate that rocket. And so Dr. Brandenburg is looking over and studying some of the data, and he stumbles upon the fact that the soil samples contain something that should not be there, something that's impossible in nature naturally. If you look at our planet and you look at these fights that are going on with places like Iran, where they don't want them to get uranium that's enriched to a certain point, people can understand what that means, because uranium on its own is not in the form when it can turn into a weapon and become powerfully radioactive and cause destruction. You have to do a lot of different enhancements to it. And so what Dr. Brandenburg found was signs of this signature that's left over that can only be left over from nuclear weapons. And they only knew that because they've studied the scenarios with what happens on Earth from it, with studying the soil and then looking what occurs in the soil from that. And so Dr. Brandenburg he's looking over the soil samples all across the planet from all the different atmospheric areas they've tested and everything, and he's finding these extremely high amounts of like I was talking about, radioactive uranium, thorium, and potassium in the soil. And again, if you look into when often civilizations become involved in lesser civilizations that are developing, and you look at all the evidence behind what happened in 1944, 1945 on our Earth during World War II, when nuclear weapons are going off, you see all of a sudden visitations and UFOs and all of these secret contracts and all these things, because as a species on Earth, humanity had reached a certain stage. We had set off nuclear weapons, and on Mars, we see that signature. Except we see that signature over 1,000 times more powerful to the fact that possibly this entire atmosphere was destroyed. And we're gonna get into the fact that what happened to Mars. Was it a natural geological process, or did something much more devastating from a advanced civilization occur? Billy, what has your research shown you?
Well, my research has shown me that in the deep, distant past, like what we talked about a little earlier, was that Mars was facing the side of the exploded planet Tiamat, and it caused a pole shift and severely damaged it, global flooding and everything else. But then it recovered to a certain point. And then not too long ago, in my personal opinion, I'm talking about just a few thousand years ago maybe, it appears that there was a nuclear war on this planet. And I come to this concept or this theory just based off of what, Dr. Brandenburg, his credentials, number one, as you just stated, are, to me, top notch. And then based on this document, which was a great paper, and he wrote it in 2014. It was called The Evidence of a Massive Thermonuclear Explosion on Mars in the Past. That's the name of the actual paper. And so when you start looking at, Mars has the high concentration of the gas isotope xenon-129 in the atmosphere. It's got xenon, which is basically produced by nuclear reactions. We all know this from studying Bikini Atoll and some of the places that we've blown up on Earth, like you just said. And then the surface of the planet has an excess of uranium and thorium. Thorium and uranium are a byproduct of nuclear signatures. But the fact is that these conditions are likely the results of anomalous explosions on Mars in the past. And I think that the evidence is very, very clear. and that information has been suppressed. And that is what I think did in Mars' atmosphere the second time, was probably several massive thermonuclear explosions. And this probably happened right around the time of the last pyramid war on Earth, where Ra had to escape out of the pyramid by his scribe. He described them out through a secret hatch, and he escaped. But there were a couple of pyramid wars on Earth, and the evidence of it on Earth is the fact that you have the Mohenjo-Daro and the Indus Valley. You have the vitrified sand. You have the dead bodies still laying in the street holding hands. You have in Egypt, when I went there, you put your hands in the sand. At Giza, you pull up balls of glass, which is evidence of vitrification, that like you're talking about 3,000 degrees to turn sand into glass. So you have all this going on. We have all this evidence of it on Earth. And so it really appears that this war, this last pyramid war, not only was global, but it appears that it might have been interplanetary. It seems that it extended from Earth to our moon and even on to Mars and maybe even beyond. We don't know, but it seemed more like a war within this sector of the galaxy between the Anunnaki and whoever, or maybe just between themselves.
Isn't that mind-blowing to wrap your head around, to try to think about? You think about how limited the perspective we've been given on history is, fighting over little bits of land on Earth, and yet all around us, just in the past, less than 100,000 or a few 100,000 years ago, there was wars around us in space, almost like some kind of a sci-fi Star Wars movie, except you start to look at that, you start to realize, hey, maybe these aren't actually, what is sci-fi? Is it, are they actually some kind of a loose documentary about what's actually out there in some cases? And to me, when you really look at Mars and the situation that occurred in the past, and the soil samples and Dr. Brandenburg's work speaks volumes. I don't know how you can argue with that. There's no way that these signatures could exist without nuclear weapons going off. So having said that, we need to look at the situation we're in on Earth right now, with instability all over the globe, and the fact that World War III might start, and it could be a nuclear war. And all we need to do is look at what occurred to Mars. Let's think about for a minute a planet that had likely rich life, oceans, rivers, forests, everything you can imagine like Earth. Just imagine a nuclear fallout that looks like when you had these thermonuclear weapons that went off, and soil samples are much more concentrated in certain areas than others. And that tells you that those were where the bombs were actually set off. And based on that, if you look at the evidence, it's really kind of scary and depressing to think about, because when these massive nuclear weapons went off, much more powerful than we have on Earth, they caused what looks like a nuclear fallout cloud to then simultaneously pass around the entire planet. And it was so powerful that the atmosphere was blown right out into space. And so if you were thinking about what would be like a disaster in a short term, in a very small amount of time, you would probably have only less than a few years where most of life, all the vegetation and water, all either evaporated or died in a span of a short amount of time. And I think it's important we realize that, because we're sitting in the crosshairs of that possibility, and we have to take Mars as a lesson to remember what could occur from both advanced civilizations far ahead of where we are now, to just life itself being wiped out.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. I try to tell people all the time on my blogs and my groups and on my talk sessions that, because people always say, why are you always talking about the past? Let's talk about the future. I said, no. He who does not know the past is destined to fail in the future.
That's right.
And that's a guarantee. We need to really truthfully understand and grasp the past to its fullest that we possibly can, to avoid, because the past is the future.
That's
now,
right.
when you figure out what the past really is, and you get the true revelation of it, then the next step is to be able to actually alter and change the future. And how do you do that? By using the knowledge that you gain from past information, because knowledge is power. That will allow us to break this cycle, this loop of climbing up to a higher level of civilization and then crashing down again because we destroy ourselves. And it's a bad cycle, and we got to get out of it. And the only way to get out of it is sessions like what we're doing right here, to learn about what really happened, so we can try to get this word out, and hopefully the right people hear this and get into positions of power, the next generation or the generation after, and realize we got to make a change.
Absolutely. We have to look at our world and the military kind of empire control that's here and not allow it to continue. It's such a silly thing to think about us fighting over such frivolous things like boundaries, whereas we're all just on a planet. We would just be collaborating together and excelling far beyond where we are now. And yet we just kind of pitifully fight over silly things because we're made to be distracted by those, right?
Yeah. I mean, I just read an article this morning where a young lady was arrested because she actually killed another young lady over some artificial hair, a pack of artificial hair. So here we are battling and killing each other over artificial hair extensions, and when we could be traveling the stars. I mean, we're not even a Type 0 civilization yet. Even with the military-industrial complex, as far as advanced they are, they may have achieved Type 0 on a very clandestine, operation. But planet-wide, we're not even Type 0, and what we should be based off of the Arabs, what they did in the 1700s. We should have already been traveling the stars, but the reason why we're limited to this point because the Arabs were on a fast track to space from the 1700s. But the papal inquisitions and some of the religions that came out really, unfortunately, suppressed all of the advanced technology that on the path that we were on, moving into a spacefaring civilization back in the 1700s. So it's a really kind of depressing thing. And then you had Tesla come out in the 1900s, creating electrical cars, wireless power, internet, everything else. And then, the elites knock him down, and here we are still driving in combustion engines in 2017. It's really embarrassing as a species.
And we're going to get into some of that secret technology coming up soon. But it is sad to look at the fact that we're held back so much. And I was just looking at some data, and it was, some secret data, obviously, looking at kind of, how far ahead is the military compared to civilians? And it looks like for every year that we advance with technology, the military is supposed to be 44 years ahead. And it's mind-blowing to consider what some of this technology and some of these even kind of alien Anunnaki technology they actually have. And we're going to get into that coming up in a little while when we talk about the secret space program. So let's jump gears. We're gonna jump back to Earth into our nearest neighbor, which is our moon. And the moon is another one of these very important things to bring up because Mars, in my opinion, Mars and the moon and the secret space program, the whole thing is part of the same kind of cover up and that has and cover up and suppression of the truth of what's right around us and what really is the truth of both what happened long in the past to these places and what's still there now. And so the first place we're going to start is with the fact that in 1969, so many people look at that date with Apollo 11. They say, well, I look at Stanley Kubrick and I see all the evidence that it was all faked. So did we really land on the moon? How many times have we actually been there? And that's a really difficult question to answer unless you really study the past. And so when you look at Apollo 11 and you look at how Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong and all these astronauts, and you look at the evidence from that, you see that, yes, they did go to the moon. However, because of what they saw and because of what occurred to them, especially on the dark side of the moon, they basically had to cover up and not allowed to talk about it. And then they had to film external pieces to fill in the blanks of what they weren't allowed to show. And that's that's a difficult thing to understand because at some points there is some truth there, but then there also is some kind of manipulation and creation from special effects. And I find that's the case in a lot of examples. So let's look at this for a minute. If you do a little information, it might be interesting for most people if they don't know that our moon, Earth's moon, is much, much larger than we know of almost any planet we've seen. For the ratio of the moon to the planet, automatically it's a very strange anomaly how big the moon is compared to our Earth. And the second thing is, most moons are not at such an extreme tidal lock that our moon is, to the point where, of course, everyone's so familiar, you can never see ever the dark side of the moon. You can never ever see it. It never shows itself. And so right there, it's this, you start to scratch your head and be like, wow. So if you were an ancient civilization, advanced civilization that has been here long ago, like you read in the Sumerian tablets, you read the Enuma Elish, you read the Atrahasis, the Sumerian Kings List, you read countless of these, you read these ancient cuneiform writings, and you learn that there are these ancient beings that came here almost 500,000 years ago called the Anunnaki. And it talks about how the moon was their kind of staging ground to watch and monitor their colony. They considered Earth their colony. And that's a wild thought to consider, that we're in this illusion of reality where we're all distracted by material things and kind of running around doing silly activities. Whereas on the outside, we're just a colony of an advanced civilization that's using the moon as a construct to monitor us and to monitor the development of where we're going.
Yep, absolutely. That's it's really amazing. And there's a movie that I kind of relate this to. It's called Jupiter Ascending. If anybody hasn't seen that movie, I suggest they watch it. A few people gave it a low rating because I don't think they really understood the implications. The fact that humanoids are abundant in the universe, number one. Number two, the fact that in that movie, an actual person owned planets. And some people own solar systems, and some people actually even own sectors of galaxies.
Mind-blowing, absolutely.
Mind-blowing. You see, so like you said, we're running around here, worrying about, we got to take the kids to basketball practice. We got to go to the mall and buy this stuff for the holidays. And there's people out there that are basically sitting back who control this real estate, and we're fighting over little spots of land over here. But the true reality is there are people out there that own planets, that own moons, and so forth and so on. And this particular planet, was the main general was Enlil. It should have been Enki, but it was handed over to Enlil at that point in ancient time. We've had the first recording of kind of who took control overall. But it's really amazing. And one of the things with the moon is when Buzz was in the Apollo 11 headed to the moon, in this documentary done by Thomas Mickey Schroeder Jensen, What If? And he did extensive research, him and myself, on these moon missions. And in Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin publicly states that there was an object tumbling outside the capsule window and followed them. His exact words was, followed them to the moon. Now, they didn't want to report back to Houston and say, hey, Houston, there's an object outside the window that looks like a UFO following us. So they just asked them where the ejected rocket booster was. And Houston said, man, that thing is, it's been gone. Talking about. So they just kept quiet because they knew if they said that there was a UFO following them to the moon, that the mission would be canceled and they'd have to make a U-turn and go right back. And of course, when you train that many years, you don't want to go through that. So that's one instance of something very interesting happening on the way to the moon. And then thank goodness for the Freedom of Information Act, because we were able to get the black box tapes from the Apollo 11 and the black box text. So some of the text has been redacted and some of the audio has been redacted. However, there are some really, really, really good parts in that audio and on those non-redacted parts of the actual document, which is available. Matter of fact, I'll provide you with the link so that you can leave it in when you finally make the final of this. That shows where Buzz is talking about seeing concave domes on the surface of the moon as they're going over, and he says, the people in there, I bet they never get out. This is caught on the black box tape of the Apollo 11 mission. So once again, just as you said earlier, Matt, the reason people have gone so left, we never went to the moon, we never went to the moon. No, the reason why you think we never went to the moon is because of the Hollywood production that was put forward to the general public. But what you don't realize is that is a psyop in itself. The real cover-up is what's on the moon and what they don't want you to know about it. So yes, we went to the moon, and yes, we lied about it. That's what people really need to understand. The moon mission was accomplished. Apollo 11 was real. We did land on the moon, but it was a reconnaissance mission to find out what the heck these objects were that satellites were picking up, before Apollo 11 even got there. And they knew that they had to present to the public something totally different, because they needed to keep that information top secret until they could figure out for themselves even what it was, or make contact, or whatever the case may be.
They caught some pretty awesome images on the dark side, right?
Oh man, listen, there are some serious anomalies on the backside of the moon. It was a low orbiting satellite, because they wanted to get certain levels of resolution, and they wanted to scan an infrared and multispectrum as well on the surface to see what was there. And they sent back some interesting images, which are available to the general public, that clearly have anomalies on them, that when you look at them without editing, without doing anything, this is pre-Photoshop, that there are anomalies right there in front of your face, that things that you say to yourself as soon as you see them, those aren't rocks, or I don't believe those are rocks. Now, we can't say what they are, but what I can tell you is that the mission Clementine itself is kind of a, the name itself is from an old song, okay? And that song was talking about a guy whose woman was gonna go away and never come back. And what happened to the Clementine mission? It went up there, and supposedly it crashed into something or banged into something, and it hit the surface, and they lost the signal, and it never came back. So was that foreshadowing, calling it the Clementine mission? You see, these people are very smart. You got to realize these are the smartest people in the world working on these projects, and everything is hidden in plain sight. They really get a kick out of doing this to people, calling this the Clementine mission. When you look up the song, "Oh My Darling Clementine," you find out it's a song about somebody that's going to go away and never return. This is foreshadowing. Come on.
It's fascinating, isn't it? That almost everything is connected, and it's and they like to put truth out there for only those people who kind of have eyes to see it, when the rest of the general masses maybe don't notice it. I think it's fun for them, because they know that the few people that actually figure out that, oh, hey, wow, did you just see that? That connects to something in ancient history I learned. Exactly. How do they know that? And you see that it's purposeful. But those people that discover that, right, the majority of the population isn't going to see that, so nobody's going to believe them. So it's kind of fun for them, right? They know it's a way to kind of play with people, right?
Oh, it's a little jab, it's a little poke at us, and Earth is full of people that are, the way that they've set humans up genetically, and the way that they've programmed us through media and so many other things, it's like humans on Earth are the prisoners and the prison guards. So they're prisoners, but as soon as it's like the Matrix movie when Agent Smith jumps into different bodies. So as soon as one of those regular people see you doing something out of the ordinary that has something to do with something that doesn't fit into the natural environment, Agent Smith jumps into that person, and you can see that person turns into a prison guard. That person goes from a prisoner to a prison guard and tries to stop you or defame you or turn you away or pull you back down. And that's what's going on this planet right now.
Isn't that amazing that we live in a reality where the very people that aren't aware of the truth are the guards protecting it from being known without knowing it.
Without even knowing it.
Billy, I want you to talk for a minute about something that's pretty commonly discussed about how the footprint on Mars or the footprint on the moon that we, from the actual real 1969 image where they landed. Explain a little bit how it actually is real, this image.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good thing. I'm glad you brought it up, Matt, because there's been an image circulating around the internet for the last few years, which shows a spacesuit at the museum, most likely in Florida or Houston, where you don't see the bottom boot with the footprint on it, but you see the boot print on the moon surface. And the biggest thing that these anti-moon people are saying that we never went to the moon, and look, this is more proof, because we have a spacesuit that has a smooth bottom shoe, but we have an image supposedly from the moon with the boot print. Where's the boot print if the bottom of the shoe is smooth? Well, they haven't done enough research into it. Most likely this image was released as a psyop, more disinformation put out there by the three-letter agencies to keep people confused and fighting each other and going back and forth while they continue to explore space. Because if you do a little bit more research, just a little bit more research, you'll find that the spacesuit, the astronauts actually wear that suit inside the capsule. Because if that capsule has any kind of depressurization, a micrometeorite hits it and cracks it, whatever, they got to be ready to put the cap on. They got to be able to have that pressurized suit on. So it's like almost like a one piece, a onesie with the shoes connected. Now, when you land and you actually want to go for a moonwalk, now you take those 10-pound each boots and they slip right on. And you have the image there. They slip on over the smooth boot and they lace up or they strap on. And now you can go onto the moon surface and you have a little more weight helping you because obviously the moon has far less gravity. So you have these heavy moon boots that you can walk on the moon with, but you don't want to walk around inside a tiny enclosed capsule with those megalithic boots on. So those are put away until it's time to actually walk on the surface. And the evidence of that is very clear. And you have the image here. Those boots, those slip-on boots are part of the actual astronaut outfit.
That's right. And so that shows you that, yes, we did go there in 1969 and we saw some really incredible things. And there's been a massive psyop and suppression of this, we know, for many, many years. And I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around that, right? How could thousands of people all hold this secret and cover this up? No, it's not this secret. It's all of them. We don't understand that we're living in a reality where so much of this information has been covered up and hidden in a false version given to us, that when we hear some of these things that, oh, we laugh them off as conspiracy theories, most people can't wrap their head around the idea that they're all connected. It's all part of this connected version of history and reality we're given because we need to be all on the same page, right? We need to be, like we were talking about with the silliness of what we're doing on this planet when compared to the past, right? We're just shopping and walking around and staying in buildings all the time, and it's kind of silly what we're doing. We're not really accomplishing anything in most cases on a daily basis because our energy is being stolen and kind of wasted for other means. And so it's interesting to sift through this and be like, okay, this is real and this is not real, and to understand that don't be afraid to look into ancient history and the truths. Some of them are dark and some of them can scare you. But in reality is what's actually occurred in our past and who we really are is absolutely incredible from what we're actually told. So you're never going to go backwards. You're never worried, oh my gosh, I'm going to learn that, we're actually lesser than we've been told. No, we've been given such a dumbed down version, such a plain Darwinian model that the truth is actually far more amazing. And so I encourage anyone to look into the evidence and again, that word courage, because it does take courage to look into this and not have stop because someone else maybe is making fun of you or thinks about this differently than you do. And so we're going to get into the kind of the next layer, right? That a lot of people who don't study this stuff would maybe laugh at or instantly discredit. And that's the idea that there's a secret space program. Now, Billy happens to be basically an expert on the secret space program. After being on Gaia TV, he was actually on an entire secret space program. So Billy, tell me a little bit about that, and then let's go into a little bit of the secret space program and where it started and began with it, maybe with the Nazis, right?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And that's really where we start. We kind of go into, we start off with deep space in season 1. We really go into the ancient past of the ancient space programs. And then we go into modern times and how the Nazis were on a search and a quest for this ancient knowledge, this ancient space program knowledge. And it appears that they actually tapped into it and found some of it and were able to, or granted the ability to use some of this technology or start working on some of this technology. They actually developed several Hanabu craft, which were anti-gravity craft that literally were able to lift men up into the air with boosters, but using also this anti-gravity engine, which ran on some type of a mercury vortex with an injection of a secret serum that we still have not figured out, which turned it a different color. And with this secret serum, it allowed it to really reach unbelievable speeds. It was even said that the Hanabu 4 can travel from Earth to Mars and back in a day. So we're talking incredible speed. According to some of these recollections, it even appears that they were first to the moon in modern times, they being the Nazis. And then through Project Paperclip, once we beat them in the war, because they couldn't get, I think they were trying to get this Nazi bell thing to win the war to get it working.
And Billy, would you agree that that may have been one of the reasons why the Nazis lost, because they were so focused on some of this advanced alien technology?
Yes. They were so focused on it, and Hitler was so focused on wanting to accomplish these goals with this Nazi. He got so bold with what he was doing out there in the world with these wars and trying to conquer. He just automatically assumed it was all going to be his anyway. And he was his main focus, and all his resources were being put into this technology and trying to develop it as fast as he could. Now, I think the United States knew about this, and they said, man, if they get this stuff developed thoroughly, we're done. We got to get them while they don't have a little bit of it done.
Exactly, and I want to pause you there, Billy, because that's a very important spot to stop for a second. The United States government realizes that the Germans, specifically the Nazis, had advanced alien technology, Anunnaki technology. Now, and this is an actual picture from that era where they were working on anti-gravity propulsion types of craft. And I want to put another little fact that not everybody knows, but during World War II, UFO, unidentified flying object situations were so common with so many of the pilots that were flying that they actually had a specific name created for it. And if some people don't know, that name is actually called Foo Fighters.
Yep.
I know there was a band made with that name, but the actual name. So during World War II, when they're up in the planes, they had this directive where if they see one of these craft that they can't identify that's flying in a strange patterns or whatever, they would have to radio over and say they've just sighted a Foo Fighter, because the United States government knew that both beyond Earth visitations were all of a sudden increasing, like we said, this nuclear signature occurring, or massive war going on, right? All these things bringing down those who are watching and or part of this, but at the same time, the Nazis are testing out some of these advanced craft, and the United States government is so aware of it that they create an entire term for it, so that they can list it in their documents and go over it. And so, Billy, can you talk a little bit about Operation Paperclip and the Nazis, and maybe how that was part of where the secret space program started, and maybe even what happened to kind of corrupt the United States as well?
It's definitely where the secret space program started for us, because that's where we initially made the quest to go find out what the heck they were doing. They were down in Antarctica, and the Nazis were, and they had basically formed themselves a subterranean base down there where they had supposedly made contact with these pre-Adamite type Anunnaki people. And what a lot of people don't know, the whole thing behind Hitler talking about blonde hair and blue eyes, he didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. He was referencing these pre-Adamite Anunnaki people that they found in this subterranean area of Antarctica. But that's really what he was talking about. And that these people promised to trade for technology, and in return, they would regain their rightful place on the surface of the planet and give him kingship and so forth and so on. And the United States, through their intel gathering, we're getting word of this and understanding that we have to make a move. We have to make a move now. So they send this entire convoy down there. And when they get down there, they literally get beat down. I mean, these Foo Fighters come up and start blasting away at American vessels, killing us, blowing up ships, to the point where we had to turn around and come back. When the general comes back, he makes a public statement that we have to be aware of a new enemy that can fly from pole to pole. And he's talking about the Foo Fighters. He's talking about these advanced UFOs that can move in unbelievable ways and can literally destroy Navy ships. So at that point, that's when the United States said, okay, that's enough is enough. We're going to drop bombs. We're going to do whatever we can. We're going to annihilate Germany, and we're going to go in there and we're going to take all their scientists. Okay, so after they literally forced the win on the war by just killing civilians, they killed it was indiscriminate. They killed everybody. They go down there, they take the Nazi scientists, Project Paperclip, and it wasn't just a few. It was hundreds. And it wasn't just scientists, it was even military officers. I think that at that moment that we got Mercury and Apollo going, a clandestine mission was automatically started at the same time for a private space program, something where they could develop these same Hanabu type craft that they saw or witnessed in Germany, but in the dark. okay, in the dark. And I think that project went to the left, and we have the NASA, which is the front for the secret space program itself. The evidence of that, even in just right now, is just the fact that we have the X-37B. It's a military rocket, a military shuttle that takes off and goes away for 2 years at a time and comes back. One just landed a few months ago. So we definitely have a secret space program, without a doubt. So that's kind of where it started, though.
Now, so Billy, based on that, I completely agree. If we're looking at a situation where the U.S. government obtained all of this Nazi technology and their scientists, and we see these Roswell incidents and this exchanging of advanced technology, and then all of a sudden, like you said, we see the secret space program really take off. What that means, if people can kind of put those things together, it means that most of these UFOs we see are just government testing the technology they already have, which makes a lot of sense if you think about, well, if you had an advanced civilization, they obviously, during a key time of when a civilization is at a class 0 and they're moving towards the next stage up where they become more conscious, you can't just show yourself. You can't just fly in and wave your hands and everything and various things like that. So the fact that you see them flying around, strange lights in the skies, well, that's simply just our own government testing these craft with these advanced propulsion that we have. You have people like Tom DeLonge that are trying to push and show that we have all this technology already and we want to get it out to people, and that all these things are coming, right, Billy? We're kind of at the next stage where we're starting to learn about what really is going on with the secret space program and in our kind of our endeavors into Mars and like the moon and various places around us, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and the general population still really has no clue, mostly because they're already too busy with their energies going out into everyday monotonous things that they think they should be doing. But behind the scenes, we have Solar Warden, which began in the 1970s, actually, and it's very old. I mean, you made a statement earlier in reference to 40 years for every year. It's actually gone up, and how I know this is because I own a space agency. It's called First Class Space Agency. It's a nonprofit space agency based out of Florida. We don't have launch capability, but we are doing research and development on alternative propulsion systems. And I have top secret access to the Space Symposium, to private space. When you're in there, you start learning a lot of things. And one thing I can mention without violating my oath is that they're not 40 years ahead anymore. That's long gone. The military-industrial complex is now 300 years ahead of us. Okay, so we're talking about a massive amount of technology that's out there that they have buried in mountains, underground cities, and so forth that we don't have access to. And part of it is like where they constructed this this Solar Warden project, where they have these gigantic cigar-shaped UFOs. UFOs, I mean, literally the size, some of them are of small cities, Navy UFOs. These are super massive objects that we have up there right now. And it consists of 8 cigar-shaped UFOs staffed by U.S. naval officers. And that's a fact.
So Billy, if we look at the fact that we already have Elon Musk and wanting to develop a Mars colony in just a few years, with SpaceX, right? Just like Planet X and all these strange situations. What would you say about this idea of these elites wanting to have a breakaway civilization based on their status and money? Do you see any credence to that?
Yeah, they do. They definitely want to have a breakaway. Not only do they want it, they've already got a breakaway civilization. There's been lots of evidence going back and even to the 1970s that people have been taken off this planet and taken to Mars and to work. People have left behind letters, like not suicide letters, but letters that I've been taken. These are people like brain surgeons, physicists, doctors, very important key people. Some people even left their children behind. This is how big this is. And to go off to do this better life for this secret project on another planet. And those are documented facts that nobody can argue with. And so the infrastructures of what's to be this Mars colony has been worked on for decades now. Not only that, people don't realize that some of the people that disappear on Earth are taken to these Mars colonies, whether they want to believe it or not, and forced into these labor camps to help work and build some of the infrastructure. Some people are there because they volunteered, and some people are not volunteers. I guarantee you that.
Can you imagine, Billy, being taken to a place like Mars against your will and being able to look outside and see your planet far in the distance and know you're never going to go back there ever again?
It's horrible, horrible thing. And it's something that I believe is true.
I do too. And I mean, just the fact that Elon Musk already says this Mars colony is going to be up and running in a few years just proves that they're very aware of the necessity and the capability needed to design and create something like that.
Yeah, listen, these millionaires are not going to go, I mean, forget millionaires, these billionaires are not going to go to Mars and live in a tin can for the rest of their life until they die. They're going there to an infrastructure that's already going to be in place. Listen, we already know how to 3D print homes. So right here on Earth, a guy in Japan has already patented the technology and already doing 10 to 12 homes a day, 3D printed homes out of waste material. That's already going on Mars. You know, 3D printers, which can create any tool, any object. My friend who was a partner with me for my underground shelter company, Fort Terra Nova, when I was building this mini underground city a few years back, which we accomplished, was even featured on the History Channel. He actually lived in an underground military bunker, you know, for 10 years almost. They had a 3D printer back then that could literally build an entire Jeep. Every wire harness, you know, the steering wheel, anything, the bolts that you can put the wheels on came from this printer. You can build a Jeep with it. So imagine what they've got up there already. They've already got one on the space station now, but they've got them out there. And when these people get there, when Elon Musk gets to Mars, it's going to be a Kubrick type thing. On one side, the colony, people are going to be in the colony, living in an established infrastructure. In part two, they're going to have the people who are the actors at this base camp by this red clump of dirt that kind of come out on the camera and wave and look, we're trying to make a farm and these kind of things. But also very interesting is the fact that NASA came out with a release 2 years ago that said that the soil on Mars is better for growing crops than the soil on Earth. And that's mind-blowing that they would even make their statement, but they made it, and it's in the official record. So that tells you what their plans are. They're going to grow there, grow crops. They're going to do everything they want to do, and I believe they're already terraforming that planet with a lot of the satellites that are already orbiting and some of the things that they've already sent there. They're probably releasing more carbon monoxide, melting more ice, and so forth and so on.
Exactly. I agree, Billy. And so we're at a very exciting crossroads right now in our kind of development as human species, where both the internet and disclosure with all these coming exciting times of Aquarius is leading to bits of truth and leaks of truth coming out all the time now, and it's accelerating on a daily basis. And I think it's just a matter of time before, you know, this boiling pot of that has, you know, consciousness simmering inside is going to blow open, and this whole thing is going to come out to the masses. And I see that within just the next year or two, all of this is going to really just come to the mainstream, and a lot of people are going to be very overwhelmed. But I think it's an honor to be working with someone like you, Billy, where we can be part of this disclosure. You know, when so many don't think it's true or don't believe it yet or whatever it is, but we have to fight for the truth, and we have to be here and be stable and not allow anything to waver, because really we're fighting for protecting, you know, what really happened so that we can learn from it to never allow it again. And I want to close out, Billy, but I want to tell you, I really appreciate you coming on here. You obviously have a vast wealth of information and knowledge. Please check out Billy on forbiddenknowledge.com. And also he's on Gaia TV. He's pretty much all over the internet. He even has his own IMDb. So Billy is, let's just say, he's a very important ancient researcher, and I highly recommend you look into some of his other work as well. As I have a YouTube page at Matthew LaCroix and a book called The Illusion of Us. Please check it out. And I really appreciate you being here, Billy. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Oh man, this was great. We got to do it again soon.
Absolutely, we will.